welcome to our afternoon panel. My name is Jennifer Kapral. I'm the Director of Education at the Asia Society Texas Center. So welcome to our lunch panel, and welcome to May. We're here in our second day of May, which is the celebration of Asian American and Pacific Islander Month. So we have a panel here really celebrating and uplifting Asian American and Pacific Islander narratives in the classroom. So raise your hand if you identify as an Asian American educator here today. And I want you to look around. There's a lot of narratives and power in this room today, too, for advocacy. So please keep that in mind and continue to share those narratives throughout the day as we go. So I'd like to start by asking each of our panelists today to introduce ourselves. Again, the goal here is to really raise teacher and student voices. And we'll start with Mina.
Hi, I'm Mina. I'm a sophomore in high school and the founder and executive director of AAPI Rising. Excited to be here.
Great. Yes, we have a student voice here, which is wonderful. Gia.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be in a room full of educators. And I am Gonzales. I also go by Giannela. And I am a project coordinator and curriculum developer for the Asian American Education Project.
Now, could you both tell us a little bit more about the organizations you're representing today?
Well, I'm the director of AAPI Youth Rising, and I'd also like to say a big thank you to Asia Society. They've supported my group since our founding back in 2021, and we definitely would not be here without all their support. But a bit more about AAPI Youth Rising. We are a student-led, student-organized organization dedicated to advocating for issues facing Asian American youth and youth in general. We believe in the power of sharing our voices. We create a platform for youth to express themselves through speech, art, and writing. And another big part of the group is also advocating for the inclusion of Asian American history in classrooms. We developed an AAPI history lesson that we volunteer to teach in classrooms across America. And we have almost 150 chapters and chapter leaders across the United States right now, which is really cool. So yeah, we do a lot of things to just talk about issues with Asian American youth and also like our mental health and all of that, so yeah.
Mina, how old were you when you started this initiative?
I think I was like 13, 12. Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah.
She's pretty incredible, right? G?
Yeah, so a little bit about the Asian American Education Project. For those who aren't familiar, we are a nonprofit organization, and we are dedicated to bringing Asian American and Pacific Islander narratives and histories to classrooms across the United States. So we do that to accomplish goals such as combating anti-API hate through education. We also want to amplify the visibility and voices of API communities and also nurture an appreciation for diversity. We partner with a lot of school districts throughout the United States. Right now we have a strong presence in California, in New York, in New Jersey, and we have an emerging presence in Texas, in Washington, and Illinois. So we're slowly building our networks to reach more communities, Asian American communities across the United States. We're hoping to build more capacity in the southern states because we see that as an area of need for our communities there. And besides school districts, we also partner with advocacy groups and also museums. So we partner with organizations such as the Asian American Foundation, the Mellon Foundation, Stand with Asian Americans, and many more. And then, of course, our big products are we provide free curriculum to teach Asian American narratives and histories to K through 12 classrooms. So all of our resources are free for educators to use and to teach in their classrooms as well.
Yes, and thank you both. I know for both of your organizations, accessibility and keeping everything free and open access is very important. So thank you for that work. So as many of the world language teachers will tell you here today, words and language are very important, right? And within the Asian American Pacific Islander community, there's a lot of terms and acronyms. So I'm wondering if you could both speak to some of the words and language that are important to you.
I think that growing up, I guess like in the Bay Area and just growing up in general as an Asian American youth, I think that we face a lot of, I guess, comments and discrimination from some of our peers, even some of our teachers at times. And a lot of these comments and, I guess, little things that build up, we know what they are, we can recognize what they are, but sometimes it's hard to put a specific name or term to what we're facing or what we're experiencing. So I think that terms like the perpetual foreigner myth and model minority myth are extremely important in identifying exactly what we're experiencing and what we're facing, so that we can better challenge it. You need to name something before you can address it. So for our history lesson that we teach, we incorporate those terms into the lesson and talk about some of their origins, how I guess the United States has perpetuated that, and we try to talk about it from that lens and try to address it and give name to it, so that we can better address the issues. I think also the term AAPI, or Asian American Pacific Islander, is extremely important because a lot of people don't realize the diversity within the term Asian American, and I think that it's a very important thing to talk about just how many cultural groups, languages, and traditions that it encompasses as a whole. I think in middle school, I would ask people if they thought that, I guess, like an Indian person, if they were South Asian, and they didn't even think that they were Asian in the first place, which is crazy because, yeah, I think that having those terms and talking about the diversity behind the term like AAPI is really important to also uniting our group as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that statement about API and like what it represents, right? I think we hear a lot of these acronyms, API. We also use APIDA, which stands for Asian Pacific Islander, Daisy American. We might also hear NHPI, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. So we hear all these acronyms about our communities, and I think the main point is we want to communicate that we are not a monolith, right? We have many diverse cultures and identities that have their own uniqueness in our community, but we stand by these acronyms because we want to communicate that we stand together and that we are working in solidarity with each other to share our narratives and to share our histories to the world. So I think that's really important to be mindful of. And also I want to also address that when we're teaching these histories, I think it's important to know those terms, perpetual foreigner, model minority myth, to address it in a way that is accurate. But I think when we're teaching these narratives and these histories as well about the Asian American community, it's also important to be accurate and precise. So for example, when, let's say we're learning about Japanese American incarceration during World War II, you hear the term internment pretty often, but a lot of people don't know is, the term internment actually suggests that, what the unfortunate events that happened to Japanese Americans during World War II was constitutional, that it was constitutional to arrest enemy aliens. So instead, we want to be accurate and precise and move away from these westernized, models of telling these narratives and say it how it is. Japanese Americans were forcefully removed from their homes. They were contained in barbed wires with watchtowers and guards with weapons. They were incarcerated. So that's why we want to be mindful and we want to be precise and accurate when we're amplifying the narratives of AAPI communities.
Yes. I think that you've touched on this already, but just diving even deeper into that too of curriculum development. So when you're developing these resources for educators to use in the classroom, how do you involve different communities, different AAPI communities, scholars, just to make sure that you have an inclusive curriculum that is representative and accurate?
Well, I guess you mentioned that we're not a monolith, and I think that that's a really important sentiment to keep with you. And for the history lesson that we developed, it was impossible to include like every single culture, every piece of history, just because there's so much that Asian Americans have contributed to, I guess, like America as a whole. The term Asian American was actually developed by professors and teachers here in the Bay Area. So this term was born from this area, and there's a lot of rich history to include. So I think that for us, we thought that it was especially important to incorporate heroes from almost every community that we could find or think of, and to incorporate these like role models that students could look up to who were Asian American, so that they could not only think about, I guess, like the struggles of Asian Americans, like you mentioned the Japanese camps or Chinese Exclusion Act, all of these very, I guess, harmful times in our history. I think it's also important to incorporate the heroes and leaders that we can look up to and be inspired by. So that was a big part of our group, was trying to find a diverse set of heroes and role models to include in our lesson plan. But I think that it's pretty hard to incorporate like every single group within the term AAPI, just because there are so many of them. But I think that we can try to incorporate as much as possible, find the most relevant information possible, and yeah.
I think that's a great point. And I know one of the things we've looked at the Texas Center is incorporating, you mentioned this too, G, the Asian American stories from the South that are often very underrepresented. And I think there's a localization that happens there too. So really reaching out and working with local Asian American communities in your school district to make sure you're involving them in creating this curriculum, because it is impossible to cover all of the Asian American experience, right? So making it very local, I think, does help.
Yeah, and to comment on that too, like it is, I think we have to kind of come to this acceptance of we're not going to be as comprehensive as ideal, right? But I think it's prioritizing the areas of need in different communities, with the students that we serve. So for on the Asian American Education projects, and when we create curriculum, we're really focusing on the localized histories, the localized narratives. So for us, we work with many different school districts. For example, we've worked to create curriculum with the Los Angeles Unified School District, and we try to create those lessons and connect it to the history in the LA area, but also throughout California, so that it's more connected and it's more accessible to students who live there. So, we've partnered with New York City Hidden Voices Project, and we try to create lessons to address the communities there. So it's really, I think, less about being comprehensive and as comprehensive as possible when narrating and teaching the histories of AAPI as a whole, but I think it's really focusing on which groups are in high need of being amplified and being heard and more seen, and making sure that we have that balance of amplifying the different groups within our community. So yeah, it's really important to do that.
Thank you. And can you raise your hand, please, if you're a world languages teacher? We want to see you all, because we're talking to you in this next question. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And that question is, with all that you have to cover in your curriculum, with all that they're doing as well, why should they incorporate Asian American studies in particular into the world languages curriculum?
I think that inclusion is the biggest part or biggest struggle of a lot of Asian American students and just the Asian American population as a whole. Recently with Asian American youth, and youth as a whole, we've experienced a large uptick in a lot of mental health struggles over the past few years. One of the leading causes of death for Asian American youth is actually suicide. So there are a lot of issues to address for mental health. And I think that belonging and having a sense of community that you can go to is really important in promoting and uplifting the mental health of Asian American youth. So incorporating these histories, not only teaching the language, but also the culture, the history, the usage behind it is really important for these Asian American students to feel included and feel like they have a space where they can belong and they can exist and they can be uplifted and seen and heard. I think that that's really important to addressing this problem of mental health in our community. So I would say that just having a feeling of belonging is probably the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that sense of belonging, is tied to what we learn in our classrooms and what we teach in our classrooms, right? So language, it's very connected to your identity, to history, to politics. For example, Tagalog words, right? My own last name, Gonzales, it reflects the history of Spanish colonization. So, teaching language is an opportunity to teach these stories, to teach these narratives that are often unheard and untold.
Yes, and it should be the responsibility of the entire campus too, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's important. Whatever you teach, if you're an administrator too, supporting teachers as well. Going back to an earlier point made too, I just read some research that they audited US history textbooks, and they looked for how often Asian American leaders and heroes, as you were mentioning, Mina, were mentioned. And out of 30 textbooks, Asian American leaders were only mentioned in 15 of them. And within that, it was only an average of 1 to 2 pages in the entire textbook. So there's definitely a need, and both of these organizations have developed a lot of curriculum. So I would definitely encourage you to continue to look for that and use that as well. And Mina, kind of diving a little deeper into your earlier comment too, how do we create inclusive classrooms for Asian American students? What are some tools or techniques or some things that you've written about, but also you may have experienced from the student perspective?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that the inclusion comes from being heard in curriculum and being heard in lesson plans. So I think that if you can incorporate just one hero or just one person to uplift and include in your classroom, like there are so many amazing children's books written by Asian American authors that are about Asian American characters, and I think even something so simple as including that and incorporating that into your classroom is really important for that sense of belonging that a lot of Asian American youth are searching for. I think that, yeah, also understanding the myths and stereotypes that we face is really important to addressing, like, I don't know, different conflicts between students, or why it's maybe harmful to say certain things or make certain generalizations about the AAPI community. I think that just educating yourself on this and trying to incorporate Asian Americans into any space that you can is probably the way to address that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think as much as students need that sense of belonging, I think Asian American educators need that sense of belonging too, right? So I feel like there's also a need for educators to learn this history, to train educators in these histories, because teachers can't teach what they don't know, right? So I think there's still a need for teachers, not just Asian American teachers, but educators as a whole, to learn about these histories so that we can then teach these histories to our students in the classroom, and then, you know, lead into that sense of belonging that students need. So.
Yes, I think we all need systems of support. Mina actually has some of her support system here. Mina's grandparents are here today. If we can have them wave. We can't really see too well up here. Wonderful. There they are. Yes, there they are. So, and then she has two of her fellow students and her organization are here. If you all can wave too, and so back here. Yes, wonderful. So it's really great to see those support systems here today. Can you all talk about some other support systems that you've had throughout your educational career as well?
I think that art has definitely been an amazing support system for me. I know it's not, I guess, every student's thing, but I think that a lot of students could greatly benefit from a more robust art program at their school or just art resources. As a big part of AAPI Youth Rising is we have like an art corner, an op-ed corner. We want to uplift these youth through, I guess, alternative means of communication. Rather than just giving speeches, we also want to uplift them through, yeah, like making art, encouraging them to make these pieces inspired by their identity. I think that art can be a great way to do that, and that's definitely a support system that I've leaned on. It's just like creating something either for myself or to share with others. I think that that can be a great support system to have, yeah.
For me, I think it's community organizations, right? And I honestly didn't, wasn't as involved and committed to learning about my identity until I was in college. So, and in college, that's when I found those community centers, those student organizations who were on the same boat as me in, amplifying our identity and learning more about our identities. So those, those community organizations are really key in giving that sense of belonging to young folks, but also us, right, our community. So that was my support system, because they were able to bring these stories to me, and then I got to learn from that, and then now I'm hoping to do the same for others as well.
So I did want to ask, how many of you already incorporate a lot of Asian American curriculum and narratives into your classroom? Let's see if we can get, I'm not seeing a lot of hands right now. Good, some over here, wonderful, good. So please reach out to these folks whose hands you see up and see what they're using and sharing. And then we have these two wonderful guests here too who can share with you their free resources to use too. Now that we are in May, we are in AAPI month, but we should be using them throughout the year, but this is a great time to start, to spotlight. And on that, where would you recommend teachers start if they've never had access to these resources before?
I'd say that there are a lot of great resources online. Your organization has amazing resources, a really robust curriculum that you can turn to. I'd say that, yeah, if you turn to the internet, there are a lot of ways to learn about AAPI history, and it's just a few clicks away, so yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Also, we have a video recording of our lesson plan on YouTube, if you'd like to check that out. But yeah, there's a lot of great places to share too.
Yeah, and it is just a few clicks away. That's how I started my intellectual work, as well. So, and like Mina said, they have wonderful resources from their organization, and Asian American Education Project have a lot. We have a lot of accessible resources, curriculum, lesson plans, activities that you all can check out and try in your own classrooms as well. They're all available online. Just a quick search, Asian American Education Project, AAPI Youth Rising. It's all available to you all. So, you know, please use that to your advantage. And like Jennifer said, it is AAPI History and Heritage Month. So I want to challenge the educators in here today to at least, you know, find one lesson, one activity, start with a small step to teach this month. And then hopefully that'll kickstart, you know, the journey you know, in this work throughout your career as an educator as well.
Thank you, G. And you definitely are, I think, going into one of our last questions here. So thinking about commitments that educators in this room can make to advancing Asian American Pacific Islander Month and heritage and curriculum, what kind of commitments would you like to see from the people in the room? And I want to start by actually talking to I'm a former administrator, so talking to administrators of really creating inclusive environments for your AAPI teachers and students too. And it shouldn't just be on the AAPI teachers to teach about Asian American history, right? It should be something that's woven in throughout the entire school and is a focus for all teachers. So that would be my commitment I would hope that a lot of administrators would make after this conference, is going back and looking at the resources that you have and how you can share those with your faculty.
My one commitment that I would ask of all educators here would probably be to just incorporate one Asian American story into your classroom this month. I think this can be through, I don't know, a book that you have that you really appreciate, a hero that you could talk about just for a few minutes during class. I think that just having one resource or one thing to turn to for those AAPI students who need to feel heard is extremely important. And this month is a perfect opportunity to do so. There are all sorts of places you can find those resources, a lot of books out there. Even if you teach like lower grades, like even just a picture book written by an Asian American author about an Asian American individual, like I think that can all be very important. So that would be my one ask, but yeah.
Yeah, that speaks volumes to a lot of young people too. And you know, I've mentioned, you know, try to find one lesson, one activity from either of our organizations or anywhere online to teach in your classroom as a commitment. But also, you know, like I mentioned earlier, it's up to us to also do our own intellectual work. So, you know, I want to challenge you to at least learn one new thing about Asian American history this month. You know, we have workshops over at Asian American Education Project for teacher professional development, but also there's a lot of podcasts available. There's a lot of articles available that addresses a lot of narratives that are not often told. So, you know, if you could learn one new thing in Asian American history, you know, that would be a good step forward and a good springboard for our work.
And I'm hoping we can all take a moment to thank these two who, Mina is a full-time sophomore in high school, right, with a very heavy course load. G is actually a first grade teacher too, and she works on this curriculum as a side project too. So they are taking a lot of time and energy and labor into devoting these resources and making them 100% free and accessible for all teachers. So let's thank them for all of their work. Thank you. And for my last question, since it is also teacher appreciation time of the year as well, if you all could share a story of just an educator or someone who's had an impact on your life as well.
I think an educator who's had a big impact on my life was my 8th grade math teacher, Miss Cito. Yeah, she mentored us a lot and gave us a lot of great advice during the early founding of our organization. And yeah, she was just a great mentor. Also, like, I guess my family, they've probably been the biggest teachers of them all. Yeah, they've definitely, I've learned so much from them over these past few years. And also my coworkers, my board members, every member of AAPI Youth Rising, I've learned immense amounts from all of them. So those are probably all the teachers who I would thank, but yeah.
Yeah, one of my biggest supporters who was a former K-8 educator and now working with the Asian American Education Project. Her name is Dr. Virginia Lohagan. She has just been my #1 supporter and really pushing me to be in these spaces and you know, join her in this advocacy work. And it's kind of a nice full circle. I met her in undergrad, but you know, nice full circle now that I'm kind of working with her at the Asian American Education Project, and I'm very honored and grateful to be you know, working with her and you know, being able to be a part of this work as well now. So thank you.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining our lunch panel here. So I hope you all are walking away with some new resources. You can scan the QR code in your program too to find more about the different organizations these women work for and all the different resources that are available. So hopefully you leave here with a lot of new tools and strategies to use and bring these narratives to your classroom.